Hi there, my name is Will, and today I'm going to walk you through how you can write your code inline as well as in dedicated files in Kestra. In Kestra, you have the option to write your code both directly inside of your workflow, but also in a dedicated file. I'm going to walk you through a couple of the differences on how this works so you can decide what's best for you. Here I've got an example where I'm writing my Python code directly inline using the Python script task. There are a bunch of different plugins as well for different languages such as Julia, Ruby, JavaScript, and so on. So you can use those as well. But you can also use the shell commands task to be able to generate an environment of your choice. I'd recommend checking out this video to learn a bit more about that. For this example, we have our Python code directly inline. Now the benefit here is this keeps everything quite easy to manage. It's all in one place. If you're not planning to use this code anywhere else, it's great. In that scenario, only one thing to version control. It brings everything together. And it also gives you the benefit that if you have any expressions, you can write them directly inside of the Python code. For example, I could make an input with this URL and I could then add it in simply by using the curly brackets here to be able to paste that value in. So there's lots of really good options there. An example of where this might be useful is you want to run a couple of quick things, nothing too crazy, but you know that you can do it quite easily in Python, whereas trying to do it with something else might be a bit more tedious. And so that's where this script task comes in quite handy, because you can just quickly write a few lines of Python, whether that's download a file, maybe unzip a file, something like that. You could just quickly do it in Python, something you're familiar with, and then you can then hand it off to another task to do whatever it needs to do. However, this doesn't really work very well if you've got a large code base with multiple files and you want to run that code outside of Kestra too, maybe for local development. That is where the script task starts to fall apart. But there is another task to help us with that called the commands task. Now, as the name suggests, all we need to do here is specify the commands we would run in a terminal to run our code. Now, using the Python commands task, this gives us a Python environment ready to go, and it's going to put it automatically inside of a Docker container, just like the script task, but this means we can just run commands like we would on our local machine. Now, I've got a file in my namespace files here called main.py, and it's got the same code as we had in the inline example using the script task, but the difference here is it's in a dedicated file. Now the benefit there is I could automatically pull this from a Git repository, so I could write this locally, test it locally, and then I could automatically sync it to Kestra, so there's that benefit. But also it gives me the ability to have multiple files now that maybe talk to one another. I can have a whole Git repository be cloned into Kestra, and then I can start using it there and then. Now you may be wondering, how does this work though if I want to pass values in, similar to how I could use expressions in the script task? Well, I'm glad you asked, because we do give you the option to be able to pass in environment variables. So here I can easily just hand in a bunch of variables using expressions to be able to make this happen. So it means that I can both still run it locally, where I can set the environment variables on my local machine, but I can also then have those environment variables be set either hard-coded, or I can set them dynamically with an expression. So here I have got an environment variable called debug. I've just given it a string, but I could put any expression I like in here. And then I can simply just access that inside of my Python code by using os.getEnv or something similar to that to be able to retrieve that environment variable that I can then use in my code. So hopefully that gives you a good idea on when to use a script task and when to use a commands task. Just to recap, script tasks are great for just short bits of code that you don't plan to reuse, but it allows you to do something a little bit more advanced inside of a workflow. For example, like manipulating a CSV file so that you can use it later on in a later task. But it starts to fall flat if you've got a bigger project with more files in it and you want to version control it too in a Git repository, as well as wanting to be able to run it locally. So this gives you the benefit of being able to completely run it locally, run it in CI, and then push it to Git, and then have Kestra automatically pull those files and start using them in the workflows. And so it's quite useful because once your code starts getting more complex, you are going to want to separate the code and your workflow separately in version control rather than having it all combined. If you found this useful, let us know in the comments below. I'd love to know which task you use more often. And remember to join our Slack community where you can discuss with us further and to give us a GitHub star.